So have you ever heard an anecdote that sparked your curiosity enough to dig a little deeper, even with no one holding you accountable to do so? Well, that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. So the anecdote that I heard was about the life of Alfred Nobel. Now, what comes to mind when you hear the name Alfred Nobel? The Nobel Peace Prize, perhaps? It was what came to my mind. Well, did you know that he also invented dynamite? Isn't that interesting? Such a paradox of destruction and construction between the dynamite and the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I would say that that paradox began early in Alfred's life. Alfred was born in the early 1800s in Stockholm, Sweden. When he was 9 years old, he moved to St. Petersburg with his family, where rather than engaging in public education, his parents brought in university-level professors to educate Alfred and his three brothers in the areas of the sciences and the humanities. And I learned this at nobelprize.org. Now, while I'm sure that those were not the only two subjects that the boys were educated in, the nobelprize.org website indicated that that there was quite an emphasis in those two areas of his life. So let's go back to the anecdote that I mentioned earlier. Here's how the story goes that I heard. The story is that Alfred woke up one morning and was preparing to have his morning breakfast. He opened up the newspaper and lo and behold, there was an obituary. Well, it was his obituary, which obviously was inaccurate. But the anecdote goes on to say that he was so dismayed by the story the story of his life and his legacy that the obituary had painted, that he decided to take his $9 million fortune. By the way, he had never married and did not have a family, had no heirs to leave his money to. But he took his $9 million fortune and used it for the institution of the Nobel Peace Prize, which is a really nice story, and it was successful at spurring the listener to stop and examine the legacy of their own life. However, my research didn't quite prove that little story. The story that I discovered in my research, rather, was that those seeds again were planted early in life through his education in the sciences and the humanities. And then those seeds were later watered while and nurtured while, again, of course, he took his science education, and not only did he invent dynamite, but he had 355 patents to his name when he did die. So he accomplished quite a bit in the sciences, but then later in life began to focus more on the humanities. And again, those seeds that were planted earlier in life were further watered by and nurtured by a relationship with a woman named Countess Bertha von Sutton. Now, this was not a love interest, not a love relationship. She was actually his secretary for a short time before she went back to her country to marry and carry on her life there. But Countess Bertha von Sutton was apparently quite a peace activist. So I believe that her influence on Alfred Nobel's life in the later years are probably what actually brought about the institution of the Nobel Peace Prize. And Countess Bertha von Sutton herself won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1905, which I thought was very fitting. So again, an interesting little anecdote, not quite accurate in the way that it was delivered, but it did spark my curiosity enough to dig a little deeper and find out a little bit more about this interesting man of Alfred Nobel. And in closing, I'd like to leave you with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who says that nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind, mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. Thank you.